Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Megan Trush. I am the Associate Director of Partnership Development and Stewardship here at the Diversity Institute at Ryerson University. We also lead the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, or WEKH, as you'll hear me refer to it. I'd like to first and foremost acknowledge with gratitude that the work that I do takes place on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, which is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I'm really pleased to be here today, and before we jump into stereotypes, I wanted to talk a little bit about the research, and apologies in advance if you've heard this from the WEKH team before, but there's certain structural issues we always have to remember when we look at entrepreneurship. So when we talk about SME owners in Canada, about 16% or 114,000 are women. But if we define entrepreneurs as self-employed, it's 37% or close to 1 million women. And so the definitions really matter. The fact that women are less likely to be incorporated, more likely to be in certain specific sectors, including the services sector, more likely to be smaller, to have different aspirations than their male counterparts, is really important when we think about where we are and also the impact of the pandemic. Women-led businesses are less likely overall to be high growth, but in some cases it's intentional because the goal is sustainability. When we talk about financing, women are less likely to look for credit from financial institutions and slightly less from friends and family, and 4 times less likely to receive venture capital than firms owned by men. And though I know groups like SheEO, the 51, and others are working to reverse that stat, I would submit that it's a function of embedded and internal biases. And all this was the case before COVID-19 entered our worlds. Women entrepreneurs in Canada have been disproportionately affected, as I'm sure is not lost on anyone here today, and Black, Indigenous, and disabled entrepreneurs most of all. Because of the features of women-led businesses in aggregate and the structural barriers they already faced, the impact of the pandemic has been far more pronounced. As we start to look towards recovery, it has never been more crucial to support and empower women entrepreneurs so they can grow and they can thrive. And stereotypes serve as important barriers to women entrepreneurs, both in terms of conventional definitions of entrepreneurship and gendered expectations, both at home and in the boardroom. Black, racialized, Indigenous, LGBTQ+, 2S+, and disabled women have to contend with additional layers of discrimination through both overt and structural racism, colonialism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, and just garden variety exclusion. It's exhausting. If you search entrepreneur, it's getting better, I will say. But when we first started out with the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub in 2018, and you searched entrepreneur under Google Images, it was all men in suits. And I think most of them, but there were a couple who weren't white. It's galling, and it's a really limited understanding of what it means to be an entrepreneur. And so last week, the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub launched the See It, Be It database, profiling over 1,000 diverse, inspirational, award-winning women entrepreneurs across Canada, including many in the SheEO community. This, accompanied by WEKH's research on stereotypes faced by women entrepreneurs and the role that it plays in their advancement, aims to break down barriers and reframe the conversation. It's time to expand the conventional understandings of entrepreneurship to include not just new sectors, but new ways of knowing and doing. We heard loud and clear in the roundtables that we held over the course of the last year with Indigenous women, Black women, women with disabilities, that traditional models of doing business don't align with their worldview and they don't meet their needs. But it's innovation nevertheless, and we need to make room in our understanding of what it is to be an entrepreneur to include ventures who are doing things differently. And I mean, SheEO is doing incredible work and absolutely leading the charge in this. It's inspirational. In a study last summer in the ag sector, we learned that despite representing 30% of farm operators in Canada, women entrepreneurs in rural and agricultural sectors still face discrimination and the perpetuation of stereotypes around traditional gender roles, and many don't view farming as entrepreneurial. Despite years of effort to get more women into STEM, the representation numbers are roughly the same now as they were 30 years ago because of retention issues created by a culture in a sector that is hostile to women. While there's significant progress in recent years, thanks largely to advocacy of so many in this ecosystem, we still see panels and discussions. I saw one last week and just like my jaw hit the floor. Panels and discussions about innovation, or worse, inclusion, that don't include a single woman, much less a visible minority person. And the recurring excuse, we couldn't find anyone. The examples go on, and it sends a signal to the next generation about who does and does not belong. And that's why WEKH, with input from our incredible network of partners all across Canada, have launched this database to challenge the definitions, invalidate the excuses, crush the stereotypes, and show, I'm going to cry a little here, show diverse women across Canada that they can see it and they can be it. And now, to illustrate the importance of challenging stereotypes, thank you, Norma. To illustrate the importance of challenging stereotypes, please join me in welcoming two incredible SheEO ventures. We have Nita Tandon, CEO and founder of Dalcini Stainless, and Kyla Bolden, founder of WizKid Coding. All right, so hi. Nita, we'll start with you. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your entrepreneurial journey to set the stage?
Well, I'll start even further back than that. I will tell you, I was, I'm born in India. I moved to Canada.
Nita, are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear Nina.
Okay. So I immigrated from India. I moved to Canada. And when we immigrated, we lived in a small, tiny little apartment.
Oh,
I think.
SheEO team, I can't hear Nita.
I think everyone else can hear, though. I can see from the notes. Do you want me to just continue going?
Do you want her to just continue going, or wait? Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So as an immigrant coming to Canada, we had very, very little money. I think it was $7 for a family of 4. We lived in a tiny little apartment. And if you know Ottawa, it was Caldwell, which it's sort of known here as being the projects, tiny little place. And the reason I'm telling you this is there's actually a longer story, but it was basically we lived with nothing. And then there was a woman that walked past our apartment one day, looked in, and she saw that our apartment was empty. And we had been like that for about a year. All we had was bed sheets and blankets. And she said, let me get my network. She contacted people. She donated a bed. She donated 2 cribs. And then she came, and at Christmas time, she gave us a Christmas tree. And so what I guess I'm trying to say is that sometimes help doesn't come from people that look like you. And I really feel like that's what SheEO was for me. I continued, when people ask my mom, why didn't you ask for help? She just felt uncomfortable asking for help. She didn't want to inconvenience anyone. And here's history repeating itself, because when I started my business, I definitely felt roadblocks and issues and blockages, and I didn't want to speak up. And in fact, even with SheEO, I had said to Vicky, now that I know her better, I told her my initial response was, here's another organization that will be like all the other business centers that I've been to. There are white women predominantly that will not understand the barriers that I'm facing as a woman of color. And it was so different. It was completely different. And so one is I would love to say to the people of color in this group, trust this organization, be vulnerable, let people know what the struggles are, and help will come. And so another thing I wanted to also mention is that sometimes the struggles, we don't really talk about them. And sometimes we think it's assumptions and we think it's someone trying to be mean to us. My issues weren't like that. I grew up in Ottawa. I didn't have a whole lot of racism overtly saying you cannot do this because of your color. So I grew up thinking the world's my oyster. I could really do whatever I wanted. I went to nice schools, all of that. But then in business, there's a very different model. And again, in Ottawa, it's predominantly government. and it is white men in high tech. And so when I came to the entrepreneurship centers and I would say, this is my business, I have a business, a product, and I really, talked about food containers. It did not have the appeal to everyone else. And when they were looking at my growth, they were thinking, oh, have you thought of that craft sale? And it was very church basement craft sale type thing. That's what I was aspiring to. And if I wanted to look at something bigger than that, there was this view that I don't think it's possible. Generally not being mean to me, but they hadn't seen it. So this idea of representation matters. It 100% matters. And when I look at who were my role models, I didn't have a whole lot. But I will say, looking to the US, Michelle Obama was a huge role model when I looked at things that she was saying. I just resonated with it. So examples like that. Even just most recently, there was, I live very close to a US border, and the borders are closed right now, but they said for businesses are free to come and go. And I sound white when I speak over the phone. So I had contacted the US border. I went through all the criteria. What did I need to bring? I brought all my documentation. I had everything ready to go. I got to the border, but I don't look like an entrepreneur. I wasn't, in an expensive car, white male driving across to do business. I was in my minivan going across. I said, I've got all the papers. I can show you my incorporation and all of that. They didn't even want to look at it. Mm-hmm. I was turned away. I needed to come home. When the paper was signed, I was smart enough to look at that piece of paper and remember the name. So I came back to Ottawa. I got on the phone, I called again, and the person who I'd spoken to remembered me from the time before. And I basically said, what else do I need? So all I'm saying is sometimes it's not so overt where people tell you you cannot do something, but that stereotype or that unconscious bias that I don't look like an entrepreneur, or I don't look like a business person, or I am guilty before I've even entered the situation is very real.
Yeah, absolutely. Megan, can you hear us just to make sure?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
yeah.
I can.
All right. Well, I'm very sorry to have missed the first part of that, Nita, but based on the reaction in the chat, my goodness. Mm-hmm. So what, let's see, I guess, Kyla, I know you're new to the SheEO community, but no stranger to entrepreneurship. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, and how you're working on the world's to-do list?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for having me. So I'm the founder of WizKid Coding, and we teach kids how to code in our in-person and our online classes. So that's what we do. And really, when thinking about how to work on the world to-do list, we are focused on providing kids and young adults with the skills in order for them to successfully go out in the job market. And coding is a massive part of it. The tech industry is huge, and almost every industry across the board needs people who have programming knowledge. So that's one of the things we're really passionate about, teaching kids from as young as 4 all the way up to teaching them the skills of coding and really how they could use the skill to change their lives and the lives around them.
That's incredible. And when we spoke earlier, you'd mentioned instances where you didn't feel like you fit in the box that others were trying to put you in. Can you share a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, and I could really resonate with what Nita said. So I actually grew up in Bermuda, but I was educated in the US. So I went to schools in Princeton, New Jersey, and I went to university in Boston, Tufts University. So through those experiences, and then also through starting my own business, I feel like a lot of times people downplay the growth that companies run by women of color can have. They try to pigeon you into this hole that says, hey, you're not allowed to run a company that has major growth like the other men and white men and people who are not minorities. They question your aspirations oftentimes. And I found that a lot when I started my business. I started my business when I was still in university, when I was in my senior year of university at Tufts. And it's been, it's been a journey, definitely. But what I would say is something that helped me is even when I didn't feel like there was space for me, I knew I had to stick in that space and make sure that I felt internally that I was valued, that I had a right to be there. And just like when Nita had to like go back to the border and show, hey, like, you know, these are the things I have, and you are wrong, basically. And I'm sure you've had many instances like that before, Nita, too. It's important for women of color and women in general to not back down, to know that they have a right to want to grow amazing, terrific businesses that do incredible things. And also those who are allies to make space for them too, because that's something that's what Nita spoke about too when she her family moved to Canada. You know, it's a two-part thing. So that's what I really encourage.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And to not assume that you need to fight the fight on your own.
Exactly.
For me, it was, you know, I was super thankful for SheEO. I was glad to receive funding, but for me, the bigger support was, you know, after George Floyd, for me, it was such a deep and personal hurt that I felt like no one else could understand what I was feeling, and that only people of color could understand that. It wasn't until I joined the meeting and I don't know if I've ever told you this, but for me, I'll even cry now. It was such a big moment when she shared a poem that she was hurt just as much as I was, and that she wanted the system to change just as much as I did. It wasn't about me fighting this on my own. And it was where you could kind of release it and say, oh my gosh, like, how do we change this system? And it's not a fight that I need to fight on my own. And even to go back to the border, you know, my growth is not going to be like everyone else's because there are so many start and stops, right? Me having to go to the border twice, to have 3 phone calls to get there, to, you know, all of that, it's a lot slower. But I think, you know, even with my support from SheEO to say, no, get back in there, like, go, let people know about your story and let people connect with it, because I cannot be the only person that's facing this. There are others.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think like this year has just in so many ways reinforced the need for community and coming together around it, and just like finding that community and the tribe of people who will understand, and if not understand, empathize and lift you up no matter what. It's so important, especially for you know, women of color, to have that, to be able to find those kinds of spaces. So thank you.
I would just have 2 things before we get cut out. I would just have 2 asks. My one ask is for women of color to be more vocal. It's taken me this long to get more vocal, but to really let other people know what are the barriers, and if there's systemic changes that need to happen, let's explore that, because just talking about it isn't doing the work. The other is for women that are not of color to really hear from the people of color what the struggles are, and to jump in and help out wherever you can. When you see injustice, say something and not just let it continue.
Nita, I was going to say a very similar ask, but I would just like echo that women of color definitely make sure you are vocal and make sure that know that you have the right to be in any space that you want to be in. And that's something that we see at SheEO a lot. People making space for each other, recognizing their privilege, and making sure that they can uplift those who, just because of the skin color that they were born with, don't have that privilege that they have. So yeah, I would echo what Nita said.
Amazing. I have one small ask. Please visit WEKH.ca to help us share the See It, Be It campaign so we can continue this amazing work of challenging stereotypes and pushing the envelope. And I think just thank you. Thank you so much to my panelists and to SheEO for having us.